Okay, I apologize that people out there can't see me necessarily, but welcome to the February 2024 meeting of the CV3 Manhattan Committee on Transportation, Public Safety, the environment, and maybe one other thing, sanitation. So tonight it's a hybrid meeting. And so we're going to allow people in the public at some point to, make public comments. This is going to be, I apologize in advance that our technology is consists of 2 laptops connected to a Wi-Fi. But let's get going. First, let's have roll call.
David Crane,
Here.
Solomon Fletcher,
Here.
Vincent Sarita,
Here.
Sean Garcia, Nancy Conk here, Michelle Smith present, Lee Berman
Here.
Jamie Zario here.
So are there any changes to last month's minutes? That was basically the vote sheet. It's wrong. Okay, so there are 2 items on the agenda. They are the East Village, Lower East Side waterfront access. We'll be hearing a presentation on that. We'll do that one first. And then the second one, we are going to be considering guidelines for commercial street activity permits. So the one that most people are probably here for is the waterfront access presentation. So I'm going to ask DOT, Parks to come and present that for us.
Before you do that, I have a quick question. Are we going to be asked to vote on either a resolution or endorsing this plan tonight? Susan is not shaking her head now. Okay, thank you.
Which ages it goes.
That's correct, right?
I think it's set in.
Yeah, we will share the screen where we have the presentation, but
Just a share screen there.
So just as information, whenever it says informational presentation, which I think this does, it means that we're not voting.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kate Scher.
so let's all be quiet and one person speak because the mic, it's gonna get confusing for people out on the internet.
Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Kate Scher. I'm here from the New York City Department of Transportation at the Manhattan Borough Commissioner's Office. I'm joined in person here tonight with Michael Haggerty from Star White House and Mary Kimball from Arcadis. And virtually one of my DOT colleagues, Cole July, is on the line. We're here this evening to present our findings on the Lower East Side, East Village waterfront access study that we initiated last year. So this was one of the commitments that came out of the this is one of the commitments that came out of the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. So DOT, along with the Parks Department, have been studying the FDR Drive from Montgomery Street to 14th Street to identify opportunities to improve access between the waterfront, East River Park, and the adjacent communities. This study currently does not have any capital funding, so we are presenting to the community board to hear more feedback, whether these are concepts that you would like to see considered down the line, and I'll pass it along to Michael and Mary.
Great, thank you, Kate. Should we mute that one and mute this one?
All right. Well, hello, everyone. As Kate mentioned, we've been working on this study for about a year and are now at the point to, share with everyone here what we've come up with through about a year of looking at potential opportunities to make the FDR Drive corridor greener, more walkable, and more inviting, and improving access to the waterfront and to open space. We'll talk a little bit more about the process that we've been going through, but it's include, a lot of opportunities for community engagement around the way. We've also been coordinating with other agencies and doing our own technical analysis and conceptual design work. And really the goals for today are to really, we're at sort of nearing the end of our process. So we're looking for feedback on what we've come up with. and really to hear from everyone here sort of about any kind of further feedback or comments or questions that people have. We'll be incorporating everything that we hear tonight, and then developing a final report in the next several months. So just a little about the project team. Like you mentioned, led by DOT, with support from Parks Department, the consulting team. I'm from Arcadis, who's the lead, and we have support from One Architecture. Michael's from Star White House, leading community engagement and landscape architecture. We also have Sam Schwartz engineers focused on transportation engineering, and a Matrix and TCT as well. And just a bit of background about this study. Study really came out of the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project that, I'm sure as you all know, is under construction now. And as part of the agreement for approving the plan for that project, the city agreed to do this study to look at additional access and greening opportunities along this corridor from Montgomery Street to 14th Street. As Kate mentioned, at this point, there isn't any capital funding associated with this. Nothing we're talking about is going to go into construction immediately anytime soon. What we're looking at is coming up with concepts and opportunities to help inform the city, make next steps in terms of pursuing additional funding and doing additional work to advance any of these concepts. We're also trying very much to, build off of the prior planning work that has been done in this area over the past several decades. Back to the Manhattan Borough Commissioner, Borough President's Blueway Plan, the Community Work Plan, and also the People's Plan. That really have already documented a lot of recommendations and ideas around improving access and greening in this area. And we're also trying to build up on ESCR, as I mentioned, but also some of the process that came during the ESCR process and the Rebuild by Design process to look at sort of some of the broader transformation ideas for the park and for East Side Coastal Resiliency. And then just a bit about our process. And then I'll pass it over to Michael to talk more about our community engagement and the design concepts themselves. We started just about a year ago, started with a site context and assessment, really sort of understanding existing conditions, as well as, what would be the site's context after ESCR. We then developed some initial draft concepts for different sort of big picture ideas on how to advance greening and open space and access improvements. We then refined those concepts, and we're now at the point of developing the final report, consolidating all of our final recommendations. And as you can see here, we've done a lot of community engagement along the way, which I'll turn to Michael to talk about.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Michael Haggerty. I'm from Star White House Landscape Architects and Planners. We're part of the design team with Arcadis and also with One Architecture and Urbanism that we're also on the team. And we led the engagement portion of this. I think I'll just mention there's a lot of material that we have to go over tonight. So it's like a half hour of material. So settle in. And if there's burning questions as we go, free to take them. But there is kind of a lot to go through. And also, I'm pretty sure we're sharing this with the community board. So if you want to see the deck later, the deck is going to be available to everybody. So just to start off with here, for the community engagement, it's the East Village and the Lower East Side are really big, diverse neighborhoods. And there are a lot of stakeholders for this project. There's 6 communities that live just adjacent to the FDR Drive. And then East River Park is a regional park. So there's a lot of people to talk to. We really tried to be flexible as we went, and DOT's direction to the design team was really to hear from the community what you all wanted to see studied in this project, and to take that guidance. So we did 20 different activities over the last year. We did 3 public workshops. One of them was here last summer. We had focus group stakeholder meetings with individual organizations or groups of organizations. Goals helped with a couple of those, which we really appreciated. And then we also tabled in public spaces, like in parks and at NYCHA communities and those sorts of things. So overall, those activities, in addition to the surveys that we did, we had about 1,000 conversations about this project. So we're really trying to just hear from a lot of folks. Whoa, here we go. Okay, so this is a little of what the engagement looked like. Just a range of setting up in Corlears Hook Park and talking to people who were coming by, to more formal planning workshops where we were seeking feedback on designs. And then, as I also mentioned, we ran 4 surveys digitally through the process, so that anything that we were talking about in a workshop or in a meeting was also online for people to comment on. So this project, it progressed in 3 stages. In the first stage, we did a site assessment of the study area, which was from 14th Street down to Montgomery Street. And so we looked at site conditions, urban design considerations, street plantings, traffic, et cetera, to really understand the area. And during that period, we were also having community conversations around concerns. We also, at that stage, asked community members, what kinds of solutions would you like this team to study? And that led to the second step, which was the feasibility studies. So this is kind of an overview of like the whole project here. We looked at 4 types of improvements. One were upland enhancements, and that basically meant improvements to streets and pedestrian spaces and bike lanes and those sorts of things on the city side of the FDR. We also studied whether you could add more pedestrian bridges. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that was the second solution that folks wanted us to look at. The third solution that we looked at was decking over the FDR. So a lot of you may have seen this idea 10 years ago during Rebuild by Design, this idea of building a deck over the FDR, creating a tunnel and a park on top of that. We looked at that and studied the feasibility of that. And then fourth, we looked at creating a boulevard on the FDR. So converting the FDR to something like the West Side Highway or West Street. So our second step in the community process and the design process was, again, to have a conversation and get feedback on these, share what we learned about these options and get feedback. At that stage, DOT directed us to focus on the upland enhancements and the pedestrian bridges, and not to study further decking over the FDR or creating a boulevard from the FDR. And that was really the focus of our conversations over the summer. We can get into more detail around that, but what our feasibility showed was that decking over the FDR is a very large, expensive, complex construction project that would encroach significantly onto the adjacent NYCHA communities, and that it wasn't something DOT was going to move forward. And then the second consideration for the boulevard was we're looking at at FDR from 14th Street to Montgomery Street and creating in order to really study creating a boulevard or a West Side Highway-like condition, you have to look at the whole FDR. And that just wasn't the scope of our study. Creating a boulevard only from 14th Street to Montgomery Street, it doesn't really meet highway standards. And so we didn't study that further. So the blue here is what we're gonna talk more about. And then the third step in that process was to develop more detailed conceptual ideas for 5 areas. And we'll go through those. Overall, there's a vision for the study which has 4 themes: creating more green infrastructure in the corridor. And so that's to manage stormwater from like very large rainstorms that we've been having. 2, to improve pedestrian and bicycle spaces. 3, to create community anchors. So we're thinking about how people get to the waterfront and how people get to East River Park. So on the neighborhood side, how do you know you're getting close to a connection? And then the 4th theme was connections to the park. So everything that we're studying in our recommendations are trying to advance these 4 themes. And these 4 themes, reflect a lot of what we heard people wanted to see. The engagement process had 3 steps. As I mentioned, in the first step, we were really hearing concerns from community members and understanding what solutions we should look at. And the second step, we presented the feasibility of those 4 solutions. And in the third step, we heard more feedback on the refined solutions that we're sharing with you tonight. So this site plan here, it illustrates the overall recommendations for connecting the neighborhood to the park and to the waterfront. And no, you cannot see the cursor. So there's 5 areas we're going to talk about. Montgomery Street in the south, Jackson Street, Delancey Street, Houston Street, and East 6th Street. We have recommendations for those 5 connections, and then also recommendations for the spaces adjacent to the FDR on the neighborhood side. Did you have a question? I see you turning your head.
I'm confused by the orientation.
Yeah, so the yeah, so this is the Williamsburg Bridge here.
Yeah.
Houston Street is here, so you've got Reese houses, walled houses. I just for your,
Yeah,
so
no,
the
no.
Lower East Side is here and these schools up there.
One question.
Yeah, go ahead. We can take one.
One question. Could you please define where you say bikes and bike lane?
Yeah.
Could you define what a bike is, please?
Yeah,
Maybe can you just repeat the question?
yeah, I think the question was, could I define what a bike is? And I guess I'd like to just, can you clarify your question?
We'll move on. Let's go. No, we'll do this during public comment later. Let's keep going with presentation.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, so just a little history here, and why we're focused on these areas. So before ESCR, there were 6 connections to Pier 42 and East River Park. So at Montgomery Street in the south, I'm going south to north here, or left to right. Montgomery Street, Corlears Hook Park, Delancey Street, Houston Street, East 6th Street, and East 10th Street. As part of the ESCR project, some of those bridges are being rebuilt. So at Corlears Hook Park, at Delancey Street, and at East 10th Street, those bridges are being reconstructed. Also, DOT did some improvements to the Houston Street entrance. That's the overpass over the FDR. The East 6th Street Bridge is not being replaced as part of ESCR. So what we're looking at is, are there opportunities to create additional connections or improve connections? And in the process, can we create improved public realm, add street trees and greenery, and improve pedestrian safety and the bicycle network? So what the report, or what the study is resulting in is 5 packages of improvements that I'm going to describe. And the idea of the packages are that, 1, it's a grouping of improvements that DOT could seek funding for. And 2, that they're improvements that could happen in stages. So sometimes DOT makes improvements with more temporary measures like street paving and striping and those sorts of furnishings. These packages look at what a short-term improvement could be and then what a longer-term permanent improvement could be. And there's 5 packages that we're going to go through, which are the 5 different colors there. Okay, so we're going to start the journey in the Lower East Side and go south to north through each of these. So first, we'll talk about Montgomery Street. So the Montgomery Street recommendations is looking at as that connection from Montgomery Street to Pier 42, and then also looking at improvements along South Street. So that's the portion of South Street that more or less is along Gouverneurs Gardens. And we're seeking here to improve the pedestrian connections, to add lighting under the FDR, and to improve the greenway connection in Pier 42 Park. So when we talked to community members, we heard a lot about this intersection, that this is a place where you can walk on the street to get to Pier 42, but crossing under the FDR, it's dark, people feel unsafe. there's a lot of traffic, and then when you get to the other side of the FDR, there's kind of this large paved area that's a drop off for Basketball City. And a lot of vehicles turning around. So generally, you know, we heard that for cyclists, for pedestrians, and also for drivers, it feels unsafe. So this diagram here just shows what's there now. So currently you can head north-south on South Street. If you're coming north on South Street, you can get on the ramp to go on the FDR Drive. And then traffic from Montgomery Street is also crossing that intersection. So one phase of the recommendations for Montgomery Street are near-term opportunities. So like what can DOT achieve with temporary measures like street striping and dividers and those sorts of things. So there's, yeah, go ahead.
Does this take into account the current work that is going on there now, limiting South Street, et cetera? Or is this after the coastal resiliency work is completed and the streets are opened back up?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there is a lot going on there. For all of these, the assumption for all of the improvements, the assumption is that Pier 42 and ESC are complete. That's our baseline condition. Now in Montgomery Street in particular, there's also work going on with Basketball City and that whole area. So and that work is being done by EDC. So the team has been in dialogue with them to understand where we can coordinate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if I can clarify a little bit, maybe, this isn't anything like a conceptual design of something that is actually going to be happening. These are recommendations from the end of this project of things that could be done, but funding would have to be,
Yeah.
you know, it would have to become a project of its own. So does that help? It's not like this is something that is planned and would start in 6 months or anything like that.
Yes, however, capital requests can be, can be requested from the city council members, et cetera. And it's assuming that this could be put into a capital budget that could happen in a couple of years if all approvals are.
Right, but this isn't asking for those kinds of
Right.
approvals. Yeah, so, but yeah, that, okay. And Susan?
One other thing, just to address that, this is actually, a DOT parks project with DOT taking the lead, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So it's actually the two agencies working together,
Yeah.
so they are coordinated.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I guess we will emphasize this, that, you know, the community board has a big role in all of this, you know, to see if you want these kinds of projects to move forward. You know, the community board has a role, and we're here to listen and hear the feedback
We've
on it.
been asking for this safety improvement for a minimum of 15 years.
Yeah.
That's
So,
expectations.
so I'm not waiting for it to happen next week.
Yeah. Yeah, but I totally hear that, and like you know, you recommended when we started that we be sure to review the previous plans, you know, so there are so many ideas like that have been being worked on that we're trying to help advance if we can. So in the near-term opportunities, there are three ideas here. One is to extend the pedestrian space by striping. So to create kind of a wider sidewalk on South Street in Montgomery by striping, to use striping to create a pedestrian area underneath the FDR overpass. So these are the yellow areas on the map. And then third idea is to create a stronger Manhattan Waterfront Greenway bikeway connection across Montgomery. Currently, if you're coming south on Montgomery, there's a little turn lane. So we're looking at whether you could close that turn lane to use it for the bike lane.
Can we get rid of that somehow? Is that on your? I don't see what it is. There's a pop-up that has happened. Uh-huh.
Who's the host? You're the host.
Well, I think I can. we go to the
No.
other screen.
It's not on ours.
It's
Oh, there's another.
It's appearing on top of something. It's not too intrusive, but it is. I don't know, it's not appearing online. Never mind. Don't
Okay.
worry.
Got it. Okay, so the long-term recommendation for Montgomery is to make those kinds of improvements more permanent. And so what that would involve would be to extend the curbs on Montgomery Street and South Street to create a wider sidewalk that creates opportunities for more street trees, to create a plaza-like condition with lighting under the FDR. And then lastly, to create a turnaround, a formal turnaround or like cul-de-sac condition at the Basketball City side, so that there's clear crosswalks and a clear crossing for the cyclists. Just going forward here. What happened here? Okay, so this, I'm gonna skip these summary slides because there's a lot of text, which I already said. So for each of these packages, we've also surveyed, we also discussed these in workshops. Overall, we've heard that, for each of the concepts, 60% or more people who responded to our surveys said they liked it or strongly liked it. So we've heard support for these improvements. One recurring theme through all of these that I'm sure we're going to talk about tonight is the trade-off between parking and expanding the sidewalk, or parking, removing parking to create space for green. There's a lot of different points of view about this. The options that we're showing do remove parking to show what's possible. However, if DOT were to move any of these concepts forward, that would be a discussion. And there would be a traffic study and a parking study to really understand the implications of that, and also the community desire around that, because we know there's a lot of different needs. Okay, so moving on to Jackson Street. So this is looking at the southern side of Corlears Hook Park. So as you know, the bridge in Corlears Hook Park is being reconstructed. This recommendation is looking at a second bridge that would be located on the south side of Corlears Hook Park, and then land in Pier 42 and be oriented towards the ferry that's there. One of the conversations that we had early on in this process was about just the distance, like the physical distance between Montgomery Street and the Corlears Hook Bridge when you're in the park. It's actually like the largest section of waterfront where you don't have a connection. So adding a second bridge or a new bridge here, it kind of splits the difference in there. So it creates another option for like getting back into the neighborhood from the park. We also heard that a lot of people don't like to walk down to Montgomery Street to cross under there. So for folks in Vladeck houses or Gouverneur Gardens or that live nearby, this provides another option to get into the park. So currently this street, as you know, it's next to the convent. There's this widened side, like tree-lined sidewalk next to the ball field. Water Street meets it. It's actually two-way. There's parking on either side. And this shows that condition that from Water Street, you can turn either left or right. This is showing an alignment for a bridge on Jackson Street. So a lot of these drawings, you'll see the bridge is kind of curvy. That's in order to make it ADA accessible, to give the length to the bridge to make it ADA accessible. To create a footprint for the bridge here and have a green space around it, talking about on the south side of the park now, you would need to narrow Jackson Street to a one-way street and remove parking on one side. So that's part of this proposal. Then on the Pier 42 side, Pier 42 is being built. That area of the park near the bridge landing on the left hand of the screen, the design has a mound. It's kind of like an overlook for the river. So the alignment of the bridge on that side is meant to not encroach on that mound or require significant reconstruction of the park if it was built. There's a second option that we looked at for this bridge that goes a little bit further and integrates an improvement to Corlears Hook Park. So if you look there at the ball field, an alternative for this recommendation is to integrate amphitheater seating or stadium seating. That would be an additional amenity to the park, a new seating area for the playing field there. So this drawing here just shows what that looks like in 3D. You can see in the upper right where the bridge landing would be on Jackson Street, and then the crossing over the FDR, and then that bridge landing leading to the ferry dock in Pier 42. Again, overall, we heard that people like this idea. We had conversations where folks from the Lower East Side were interested in that idea of an alternative to Montgomery Street or a quicker way to get to the park. And then, of course, this, like all the packages, involve a trade-off of parking for green space or for these connections. So now we're moving a little further north. We're going to look at Delancey Street. So there's at the base of the Williamsburg Bridge there's a bridge on Delancey Street that is being rebuilt now to connect to East River Park. So this set of recommendations was looking at improving the area around the base of the Williamsburg Bridge, and then improving the sidewalks along the service drive that are next to Baruch houses and the East River Co-ops. And there's kind of two big ideas in this set of recommendations. One is to create more of a public space at the base of the Williamsburg Bridge. So like people who are coming to cross over the park to the park have a place to meet, and that it's more pedestrian friendly under there. And then the second big idea is to create a two-way bikeway that would start at Corlears Hook Park and go all the way up to Houston Street. And that's another thing that we heard a lot about is if you're biking on the neighborhood side of the FDR, how it's difficult to go north-south. So we've studied whether you can align a two-way bikeway that would connect from Corlears Hook Park up to Houston Street and allow people to bike up and down. One thing that we heard a lot about this area is the intersection of Grand Street and the FDR Drive. So that area, you have traffic coming off of the FDR, you have traffic on the FDR service drive, and that there's some conflicts of turning onto Grand Street. And then this just shows the existing conditions today. There's a lot of existing parking underneath the Williamsburg Bridge, but otherwise it's a paved area. And then there's narrow sidewalks that are along the East River co-ops. So this package, we're looking at both short-term and long-term improvements. In terms of the area under the Williamsburg Bridge, one thing that we've studied is whether you could create a shared street condition at the end of Delancey Street next to the Delancey Street Bridge that goes to the park. So that's the yellow area there in the center of the screen. Shared street would mean that it's closed to vehicles, it's pedestrianized except for emergency vehicles and deliveries. So the near-term opportunity is to create more of a temporary plaza-like condition underneath the bridge, and then to use striping to create a protected area for a two-lane bike lane that would run north-south along the FDR service drive. So that's the green line that's running through these drawings. So this would mean shifting the parking over a little bit and realigning the lanes. But the intent is really to try to get that two-lane north-south connection there. So the longer term opportunities here are making those improvements more green and more permanent. So what you see around the base of the Williamsburg Bridge there, which is the big gray square, is creating more of a pedestrian space and widened sidewalks that could also be green infrastructure to manage stormwater. And then along the FDR service drive, which is kind of the green line there, creating more of a permanent protected bike lane that would be integrated with landscape and street trees and those kinds of improvements. I'm gonna skip this one because I've said all of those things. You know, there's a lot of there's a lot of questions around the area underneath the Williamsburg Bridge. DOT needs to be able to access the bridge for maintenance, and there's parking there. So again, there's a conversation about the trade-offs of creating a real pedestrian space under there and its current use. Okay, two more packages to go here. So at Houston Street was the next area that we looked at, and Houston Street it's a really important entrance to the park. It's like where the Little Leagues enter. There are two schools that are right there. We heard a lot of stories about how people will like walk out to Avenue D and then walk to Houston Street to walk down to the park. So this is really the main entrance of the park, and you have to cross over the FDR here. You know, the FDR goes down, and there's an overpass there. So one thing that we did hear from DOT is that DOT doesn't support any kind of planting or furnishing on the deck over the Houston, over the FDR at all. So we aren't really focused on that. We're really focused on improvements on the neighborhood side. And generally, waiting for it to change. One really important thing that we learned here is that there currently is no north-south crosswalk across Houston. So if you want to cross across Houston, you have to walk back into the neighborhood and up. And then you also have traffic going in both directions and traffic turning in both directions. So it's very challenging for pedestrians to cross into the park here. So the improvements on the neighborhood side are really focused on one, providing a north-south crosswalk at Houston. Two, providing more pedestrian amenity on Houston Street. So enhancing the bus stop that's in front of Bard Early High School with the SBS furnishings, and shortening the length of the crosswalk that you have to use to cross into the park. And then the last improvement here that you see, the green line, is the northernmost segment of that two-way bike lane that would go down to Corlears Hook Park. Again, support for this, definitely a lot of support for that north-south crosswalk. So the last area that we'll talk about is East 6th Street. So there's currently a bridge at East 6th Street, a pedestrian bridge that isn't being replaced as part of ESCR. And so I see there's a lot of comments stacking up here, but I think we're gonna do the comments when we're finished here. So these recommendations are focused on replacing that bridge and improving the streetscape around the bridge. Currently, there's a lot of paving around that bridge. And we also know that the bridge isn't ADA compliant. The bridge isn't compliant with modern universal accessibility standards. We heard a lot about bicyclists and pedestrians, sharing space on this narrow bridge. So this is the existing condition. It's along East 6th Street. East 6th Street is currently a two-way street with parking on both sides. So if you're coming south on the FDR Service Drive, you can turn right onto East 6th Street, or if you're on Avenue D, you can turn onto East 6th Street. What we found is that if you reconstruct the bridge and align the bridge so that it's landing closer to Avenue D, that would mean that East 6th Street would need to be converted to a one-way street. And then we've studied some options around how much parking you would need to trade off in order to have that. One thought about this new pedestrian bridge is because it's sitting so close to the NYCHA community to the Reese houses that you'd want to buffer it with green so that there's some buffer between the buildings and the bridge ramp. And then that bridge crosses over the FDR and it lands in East River Park. It should also be noted here that for this bridge the bridge is pretty high up to get over the FDR. There would have to be some new construction in East River Park to create the kind of elevation needed for the bridge to meet it.
I have to say, let's only use the chat for technical problems. Anything else you type in there is going into the ether. So if you have technical problems, say something in the typed chat. Thank you.
Okay,
Maybe let them know there'll be a chance to raise their hands after.
There will be a chance for spoken comments and so
Yep.
forth afterwards. Right.
yep. So this recommendation also includes alternatives where we did study other ramp alignments to see how much parking could remain with this. And so the final recommendations include these. And if this proposal were to go forward by DOT, there would be more detailed study around parking and traffic impacts and those considerations. Oh, let me go back one. This 3D just gives you a sense of what that looks like from a bird eye view. Again, we had a pretty lively conversation with Shahida around this concept, but it's pretty interesting. The responses in the surveys expressed a lot of different points of view about the parking on these streets. Okay, so that's the recommendations. Thank you for your attention. I know that there's a lot that we covered there. Just to kind of wrap this up, there's findings from our engagement that are going into the report that really lay the foundation for the next stage of planning and design, if there is one. We're noting the issues that we've heard about safety and traffic impacts. Those would be studied in more detail. And generally, we also have noted where, people have voiced support for more green along this corridor for better pedestrian safety, and other amenities. And I think there's one last slide here for Kate and Mary.
So we're interested in hearing your feedback on the concepts, but I'll defer to the board on how we'll take the questions. So some of the follow-ups from this study, as Michael said, DOT and the Parks Department currently do not have capital funding. So the next steps would be to, if there's support for these concepts, to identify funding for design, and the agencies would also have to dive deeper into the studies individually, as well to, and come back and continue engagement. Mary, any additional?
No, I think we should,
So what I'm gonna do then is, first I'm gonna ask if any committee members have some questions they want clarifying something we saw or where we are, relative to process. Committee members? Okay, Michelle and first.
Thank you. I filled out the surveys for this over here. I find this, no offense, sadly unambitious. I know that people in the neighborhood really want that to go away. Why do we deserve less than the west side where it's beautiful and costs on the ground? I understand it's challenging, but I don't see why we deserve any less just because we're a lower income area. Like I know people have asked for years, we've gotten over. I understand that might be impossible.
I'm sorry, the interpreter's having a hard time hearing.
Studying to see about making the FDR like West Street. And I understand that was not the scope of this, but.
Yeah, it would, I'm not certain how we would be, what we would need funding in order to conduct a study of that size. And I'm not sure we would have to identify it, there would have to be community support to do that. But at this time, I'm not sure how we would source that.
I mean, didn't federal DOT have grants for undoing the horrible stuff that was done in the 50s and 60s to be applied for?
Not for the study.
Yeah, and like totally hear where you're coming from on that, and, you know, one of the goals of the study was to look further into the kind of questions and proposals that came up, you know, like going back to rebuild by design and that sort of thing, and, you know, our effort was really focused on like the high level feasibility of a project like that. And it would be like a project of great magnitude and cost. And within the bounds of this study, you know, DOT's direction was like, okay, we understand, like that would be a very, very complicated project. We want to focus on things that can happen in a more immediate time frame, and kind of give you and give the community projects that like you can support. And so that's the thinking there.
Yeah. You know, one other thing that I think that we can add, like, that we did learn through this study is that you really would need to look at it in a broader corridor and sort of look at all the way down to the battery, and that would bring in other stakeholders like state DOT would be another consideration. And also just finally, like in our final report, you know, we're planning on including sort of more detailed analysis of what went into that study, what we did find. So hopefully that's helpful in sort of informing future efforts if that is something that goes forward in the future.
Okay, so what I'm doing is, right now, I am asking committee members to ask questions and so forth. And then I'm gonna go to public members in the room, and after that, I will be going to the public online. So I'm gonna do it in this order. And what I'm gonna start doing is basically handing the laptop to someone in the room who wants to speak, because people are not hearing me. Michelle, specifically when Michelle was speaking, so if you think when Michelle was speaking, that was like suitable volume for the room. It's not suitable volume to be picked up by the laptops on the project. Okay,
If I could also suggest people at home, turn on your closed captions and you will be able to see what's being said.
okay, so, and actually, I'm gonna switch the mic to this, if you.
Yeah,
I'll put
That
this
makes
one on.
sense.
Right,
Then they won't hear that.
so, Trevor, why don't you type something if you heard me? I think you can. Catherine, you recently typed something. Okay, much better, Trevor says. So do we have to keep this plugged in right now? It's not gonna run out quickly? Solomon.
Oh, yeah, I have a similar question to Michelle's question about, if anything was considered about, not replacing the FDR, like, I saw that there were 4 things considered, but I don't know if there's anything considered about like replacing the FDR with potentially like a 2-way street, or something smaller than a big boulevard.
Yeah, the boulevard concept, we were looking at something sort of similar to West Street, you know, so it would be sort of a, you know, pretty substantial amount of traffic. I'm just sort of recognizing the, you know, importance of it as a connector, regional connector, at least currently. So that's not something that we looked at in very much detail, but I think that's, you know, definitely something to consider for future studies of this, for sure.
Maybe you want to stop sharing your screen.
Okay. Other committee, okay.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so my question is really just about the light fixtures. I saw for the Montgomery Street that it's gonna be included, to add the light fixtures under there, so that way pedestrians will be able to access and see and ensure better safety. Will that also be included for 6th Street? Because near John Lindsay Park, there's like that passageway where it's like dark half the time. Is there a plan to ensure that the lights are also being replaced or fixed there or being added? Because sometimes it's just very scary to walk under there.
Yeah, so the question, oh, I guess you heard the question. So the question is just about lighting, and that's a really important consideration. And, you know, that's planning that is, it's the next step. You know, if one of these if this 6th Street Bridge became a project that DOT was carrying forward, there would be more detailed design where you would really look at the lighting in more detail and figure out what's needed and make a plan for that. We looked in a little more detail at the Montgomery Street connection First of all, because we heard about it, but also because providing lighting underneath the structure, it's a little tricky. And so we had to kind of look at, well, who would provide that lighting and who would maintain that lighting? It's a little different than a typical street light that you might have. So that was why we were focused more on that. But any one of these projects, you know, were it to move forward, lighting would be one aspect of the design that would be looked at. And then further, any of these projects would involve more engagement, you know, and so the team and DOT would want to hear more about that.
I have a few questions and then I'll save my comments for later during the public. One, when you discuss the 6th Street bridge, remind me if you can, is the 6th Street bridge under according to the ESCR, is that remaining or, okay, so in its current glory, yes, the 6th Street bridge will remain. Okay, are you aware, I don't know if DOT made you aware, your proposal for a Jackson Street bridge, there's, I believe, a Con Ed easement. There's a tunnel coming underneath the East River that goes underneath Jackson Street, which seems like it might interfere with where you're proposing to build that. So
Yeah.
just FYI that.
Yeah, we did look at. Oh, thanks. Yeah, we did look at that, and if we can look at it later together if you'd like to. The alignment of where the columns for that proposed bridge at Jackson Street would fall, they're aligned so that they actually would avoid that tunnel that's under there. And you know, that's again the sort of thing where if the project were to move forward as like a capital project, that whole area would be surveyed. You know, there would be a lot of work to really fine tune the alignment with all of the utilities that are under there. And you raise like a really important point. You know, one of the major factors to consider that makes these kinds of projects very complicated is how much utility and infrastructure is underneath the area along the FDR, because you have the Con Ed, you have these oilostatic lines that really power lower Manhattan, like all of the services that support the neighborhood, you know, electricity, water, sewer, all of that, like that's down in there. And so that's what we're working around.
Yeah.
Okay, two additional. If you know the answer to this, how much was the contract between Arcadius and whether DOT or city? Do you know how much that was for?
It's around 600,000.
Okay, and then the last thing is, as part of the $1.5 billion ESCR project, there is going to be a north-south two-way bike lane going from Montgomery Street well north. So to propose that access from really from Sherry Street north be removed to create a two-way bike lane, which now negatively impacts accessibility to East River Co-op, certainly to Baruch and north. I'm not sure where the 84 people who proposed that live, or why their suggestion that the 6,400 people who live in East River Co-op, or the about the same number of people who live in Baruch housing, should be put at such a disadvantage when there will be a brand new ultra-wide two-way bike lane built with no access, with no vehicle, no cars near them.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I kind of agree with Michelle, just like the ambition of it, this whole study of not looking at the FDR completely, you know, and how that with the boulevard. I'm gonna make everyone sick. Sorry. I'm Italian. I speak with my hands. But just like that whole study, I guess, of the FDR and the importance of relooking at, I know the borough president's looking at the FDR, you know, via the seaport. How does that going to affect this area, again, going north? And I just trying to understand DOT's aspect when we can be ambitious for the seaport, but not ambitious for the Lower East Side. And again, it's just unfortunate, I think, in just how we keep thinking of the Lower East Side. And so with that, some of these, I really do like a lot of what's proposed here, and it's greening. I mean, it's unfortunate. We have the nicest park for the Lower East Side is East River Park. It's the largest. I bring my kids there. We use it when it's going to be open again. But the access to it is terrible. It's not comforting to walk there. The sidewalks are narrow, they're dirty. So I am looking forward to something that happens, but will anything here deter a conversion in the future? So when I start seeing like bridges and other infrastructure, that's for somebody else 20 years from now to say, oh, well, we just built that bridge. We can't take it down. So now we can't do this.
Yeah.
And so I just don't want this and capital improvements here to deter a better project for the Lower East Side in the future. And so I think that just needs to be included in the study, that so people 10 years from now, when we're looking at funding this, if we ever get funding, is just put that into perspective. Time changes.
Yeah.
So, and then, sorry, I took some notes here. And then Delancey Street, again, the improvements there, I think that's a major connection, like Houston Street, all of these connections. And just, I know that there's a limit to the study, but just how those streets connect into the neighborhood, and what is that, that feel of the pedestrian walking from the neighborhood, getting on the streets that have those access points. Because again, there's not many access points into East River Park, but to make sure that the access to it is safe and accessible to the neighborhood to actually get to the park. And so I look at, like, again, DOT looking at, just further in as we kind of go through.
Right, that's helpful.
Nancy.
Thank you, David. I actually have to echo what Vincent and Michelle have talked about. There are billions of dollars in the federal infrastructure bills, and it's written specifically for areas such as, the Lower East Side, historically disadvantaged. And they're written in a fashion where you can fast track it. It's almost as if it's written for us. And the reason I know this is because we've been talking to Senator Schumer and Gillibrand's office and their staff. So to say that we don't have funding, we were designing this with no clear funding in mind, there's actually opportunities today for that funding. And so I strongly encourage you to think bigger and to go after that funding, because again, what I've been told is that there's money literally left on the table every year. And so we're short-sighted if we're not looking at a bigger plan, and as well as like doing this without, with thinking that we're not going to get funding. There's actual funding out there. We just have to go after it.
Yeah. Can you, is this more serious?
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
Mayor, so the question was just about like the funding, and we know there's a lot from the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. Like, can you talk a little bit about how in the report we're narrating the next steps and like potential funding sources and those sorts of things?
Yes, we have been tracking a lot of the funding sources through BIL and other federal programs. And you're right, I think a lot of the priorities in those programs do align with a lot of the projects we're recommending here. So I think, those happen, annually, many of those programs. And so, I think what we're trying to lay out is sort of, these concepts in enough detail to, be leveraged for future grant opportunities. One thing I would say too, is that like, while there is a lot of funding out there, oftentimes a lot of those programs have limits on how many projects the city can apply for. And so, I think you need to kind of, in terms of future advocacy, be thinking about like how to make this area and these types of projects a priority, given, there are other communities around the city that sort of face similar issues and have similar proposals. So definitely need to like sort of, make the voice heard that this kind of project is a priority.
Like, how do we tell whoever needs to know that this is a priority? Clearly, this is a priority.
The question is, how do we do that?
Is that more for
Yeah.
Susan?
Okay.
Well, I would say that's a strategy question that can be after this. I mean, that's, we should be considering our priorities and what we want to advocate for. And I would suggest that we might want to do that at another meeting and make a plan.
Okay, so actually, I also, in the meeting here, we have few board members. Trevor, how can I let you in here? I'm gonna let you do that.
Dave,
I
you're
think-
supposed to
Can
be
you
a
hear me now?
tech- That's what you do.
Yeah, I do capacity planning for extremely large internet sites. Different.
Susan, can you hear me?
Oh, I think Trevor was already, I had already made him a panelist.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
so Trevor, you couldn't speak. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, it's more of a couple of,
You're off camera. You can turn on your camera.
We're not hearing him. Someone else hears Trevor, we do not. So we in the room are not hearing Trevor.
But I don't know because
There's a.
is this it?
Here.
Mhm.
Oh, that's on my. There you go.
We're still working on our science sound here.
Unmute it or.
If you can try it on yours, then we'll hear it through that one. I don't know if we'll get a feedback.
I don't know why we're not hearing them.
Trevor.
Okay, go ahead, Trevor.
so my concern,
Oh, wait, we had two all of a sudden. Okay, go Trevor.
so my concerns have to do with Montgomery Street, and there are basically two of them. They have to do with the previous funding that we thought was allocated for Pier 42 and the Montgomery Street entrance. Because you're talking about funding, what happened to that? Because we saw designs that included a roundabout and other entrance improvements to Pier 42, which we thought was previously funded. The second is that I hope you're looking at this holistically, and I see that you are. Pier 36 is really a convention center, and when we think about areas, we sometimes neglect to think about pedestrian and trucks and support vehicles that go there. It's not really just Basketball City. I mean, there was the balloon thing this past few months that hundreds of thousands of people went to, and lots of support trucks. And it's a very, very confusing entrance. We have to think of that as a convention center. The third thing is that EDC issued an RFP to convert Pier 36 to a waterfront freight shipping hub, which will include more traffic if it goes through, with the only vehicular entrance to that being Montgomery Street. So I'm just hoping that whatever plans that you're looking at include those particular concerns, because that entrance is already overloaded and will continue to be overloaded as long as it stays as a convention center. And if we get the last delivery, or whatever they call it, the blue delivery point at Pier 36.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank.
Well, just one thing I think to clarify, I mean, we should confirm with EDC, but I believe the entrance to Basketball City and that turnaround that we showed is moving forward and is already funded. We're just trying to like coordinate with those improvements and show them in our plans here too.
Okay, that's good to know.
So, why don't I, get in, and then I'm gonna come to the public and the audience. So Daniel, we're gonna.
Okay, I'm gonna promote, there's a couple of parks people that I'm gonna, I'll promote to,
I see
where's,
Catherine.
I'm looking for Daniel.
With a hand up there. Well, yeah, I'll let you.
Oh, okay, I see him. Okay, Daniel, I'm promoting you to,
Other parks people.
and I'm gonna promote Catherine Freed.
Yeah.
Thank you, David, and so I participated in a lot of these community meetings, as well as participated in a lot of the two of the previous plans that they mentioned that helped inform this. And my comments are mostly about this process, because I actually like all the ideas they came with, but echoing Michelle, they are very underwhelming, because they're all things that we had been asking Parks and DOT for waterfront advocates to create more access for pre-Sandy and pre-ESCR things that our neighborhood should have had already if we were a more well-funded neighborhood. And this process that generated this plan, I feel like was just a way to appease those of us that were, and trick us into thinking that it was a possibility again to deck over the FDR and to turn the FDR or turn the FDR into a street with at grade pedestrian crossing and bike crossing. So I like all of the ideas that they came up with, but I don't think that this process actually fulfilled what the council members and community board got for us from ESCR. Thanks.
Catherine. Okay, okay, are any more of the Parks Committee members have a question? Okay, Catherine, you're a panelist, so you can unmute yourself and go ahead. But you're still muted. Okay.
That work? Okay. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, I want to kind of a little bit echo what Daniel said, because it seems to me to reject the idea of decking or reject the idea of a boulevard, particularly since there's been some comments about the possibility of getting federal funds for that. Because one of the things we have to seriously look at, I mean, I'd like to see decking, but even if it's a boulevard, it seems to me we need some either high-speed rail out here. One of the problems that we're having right now with the whole congestion pricing is that we lack a closeness to a subway system, or as I said, a light rail system. And plus, at the same time, there's so much going on out here. There's the park, there's changes for congestion pricing. There's also the fact, and I do have a question for you, has anyone looked at the shape of the FDR Drive itself? For those of us who live down here and see it flooded all the time, we know that it's sinking. There are huge portions of the drive that are going to need to be repaired. So why can't we look at all of this holistically? Not just this area, but the areas just north of around Lewisburg Bridge and Houston Street, but up to 6th Street or 10th Street, the FDR Drive is buckling. And it seems to me we should be looking at things, like I said, either decking it over, light rail system, resurfacing and restructuring the drive itself, because it's going to need it. So why not do it at the same time? Saves money. You can do complete planning at the same time. You could probably even put something under the drive to collect water when it's flooding.
This
because
is Vincent. I agree strongly.
What? Anyway.
This is Vincent, and I agree strongly.
Excuse me.
All right. So, but my point is we should be looking at that and looking at the potential funding sources. I had one other quick question. The people who turn at Houston Street, you have to, if you're trying to get down to Grand Street, because there's no northbound exit onto Grand Street, you have to go to Houston and make the turn and go south. And does this ease that, or does that, it looks like it makes it much more difficult, especially since you're talking about narrowing some, it looks like you're narrowing some of that lane on the FDR. There's also supposed to be some kind of camera there, according to congestion pricing, and we have no idea what it's supposed to do, but presumably it's supposed to stop people from turning, and I don't get it, but have you ever heard anything about that?
You want to speak to just the state of repair of the FDR, like DOT's maintenance of FDR and the kind of question, the bigger picture questions around the transit planning that we didn't really get into.
We need to focus back.
Yeah, I would just say that.
Yeah, can't hear a thing.
I would just say that the general maintenance of the FDR was outside of the scope of.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Sort of.
Okay, I'll hold this. I'll just say that the general maintenance of the FDR wasn't part of the scope of this study. But to your point about decking, and Dan mentioned this as well, and a boulevard option, we did consider that at the beginning of the study because we knew that it was something that people were interested in hearing about. That was something that was previously advocated for. And our initial research into that, we didn't find it to be feasible for the decking in particular. The main issue that we encountered, aside from the cost and the length of the construction, was the impact it would have on the adjacent NYCHA properties, because it would, we initially found that it would likely encroach on those properties, impact them as well. And for the boulevard option.
Well, yeah, the boulevard option, what about that? Because I live right next to the FDR also, so.
And again, for the boulevard option, the scope of this study was from Montgomery Street to 14th Street. And if we were going to look at making the FDR a boulevard, we would have had to have looked at the entire corridor.
Well, what can we do to do this holistically? Because all these things have to be done. Why can't we do them at one time? So that we can do the planning at the same time, probably save ourselves money, and realize that some of the things that this area desperately needs is some kind of mass transit, like light rail. And there should be federal funds for that.
Cool. Vincent Jenkins had a comment. Does he want to make it now?
Just say it. Yeah, he's done.
He's not, well,
yeah, so that's what I was noticing for, I agree with, Catherine, for the transit idea. I think that would just save us money as well. You know, if we kind of demolish the FDR, you know, I think we should redo that, and, you know, and that would save money, you know, instead of doing it after the fact, I think. And then also transit, that would be much helpful for public transportation, and it would open up space for bicyclists too, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know.
And Valentina is also on the board, and we need to, let me say, we've got to be out of this room by 9 o'clock. And so I want to pretty quickly start getting to the public, and I want to give people 2 minutes each when we do that.
Okay, Val, I'm promoting you to a panelist, so you'll be able to speak.
Okay, I'm not sure how appropriate this question is, because you're now saying that you have nothing to do with the FDR. But what I think about is your DOT is involved. And I remember that one of the issues with Montgomery Street was the fact that you had traffic coming from so many directions. So on Montgomery Street, you have traffic going east and west. You have traffic coming off the FDR Drive that can go, that can make a turn there or go straight. You have traffic, and that's coming from north to south. Then you have traffic that's somewhat underneath and that's there at Montgomery Street that can make a turn at Montgomery Street and go west, or can go onto the drive. And that was one of the issues in terms of safety, was the number of directions that traffic goes at Montgomery Street. And then I kind of think you somewhat answered the question when Lee asked it. One of the things that I've noticed right here on Jackson Street is there are times when they close off Jackson Street for whatever it is that they're doing here, that there's really not that much room. In front of that, I think it's St. Rose's home. In front of the home that's here on Jackson Street, that is a very, very thin street. And whatever they're putting down there, there are times when you can't basically go down that street. So I just, those are the two things that I would think. Oh, and the other thing is, as somebody mentioned, in terms of congestion pricing, the only one of the mitigations that was mentioned at one of the meetings was to toll people who make a turn, a U-turn at Houston Street. So my question is, have you talked to, I'm trying to think, that might be MTA, but whoever it is said that that's the mitigation that they're going to do for congestion pricing, was to basically toll people that make a U-turn at Houston. So just those three things, Montgomery Street and all the traffic, Jackson Street and the fact that they're putting, I don't know, all kinds of things, and that's a very narrow street right on Jackson between Water and South is very narrow. And the fact that congestion pricing is going to, the mitigation is for Houston Street is what I remember being told. And I guess the other consideration is, once again, with congestion pricing, one of the things that they acknowledge is the fact that from 10th Street to the Brooklyn Bridge would be more congested. So how does this take all of that into account?
Well, thank you, Valentina, for your questions. And I mean, also, I think we want to thank you for your engagement in this project. I mean, you went out and looked at Montgomery Street with us, and it's just really
Right.
leadership and perspective on this. I think for your questions about the improvements, which are detailed about turning and signals and those sorts of things. You know, our study, it's conceptual, it's very high level, understanding kind of what are the opportunities and what is possible. And if these projects move forward, then DOT would be looking in great detail around the lanes and the signals.
Issues. Okay.
So we didn't really, you know, we're not going to get into that at this.
Okay.
I think we all recognize that it's important.
Okay.
Appreciate you bringing our focus to this space.
Okay, I see 5 hands online, and how many of it in the room want to speak? And 3. That's 8.
Stand still.
I should stand still? You sure? Yeah, I'm allowed 2 minutes. Trying to think, I don't want open-ended questions. In fact, I prefer not to have questions. If they are, I don't want them to be like pointed back and forth questions. I will cut that off pretty quickly because we have to be out of here by 9. We really want comments that is input to the ideas that they put forth. DOT and Parks are both here to take that back. That said, if you have a question that you believe can be answered pretty easily and will be helpful, go ahead and ask it. So let me just start with the first person whose hand that I saw. I'm gonna time you 2 minutes. I won't cut you off abruptly, but I'll let you know.
Good evening. My name is Ellen Renstrom. I live in East River Co-ops. I noticed on the map that you had of the area where the Delancey Street Bridge is coming in, and in the other areas, I didn't see any place where bikes were going to be in the park, so that you're talking about having a bike lane outside of the park instead. I asked specifically to please define a bike because I'm not in favor of having the motorbikes, et cetera, which seem like that's who's going to be in those lanes. Whereas for over 30 years, I've ridden north-south in East River Park on my bike and have found it to be very pleasant. And I look forward to doing that, but there was nothing in your drawings to show that there are bike lanes in that park, in East River Park. I find that distressing. Regarding Houston Street, if you're on the south side of Houston Street, you just walked across, there are lights to get you over to the park. And if you're on the north side of Houston Street, you walked across those sidewalks to get you across. Traffic is stopped in both places. There are walk and don't walk signs. I don't understand why you feel you need to have yet another sidewalk put in there. On the park side of where you come across the park at the pass up there, you can walk between the north and the south side there. So I don't understand having yet another, making a box. I don't understand the need for that. The idea to have the bike lane taking part of or all of the service road, was it only part of it or all of it you're taking to do the bike lanes, to do the double bike lanes? Additionally, underneath the bridge where you say that you'll have this nice little area to gather, What about in the next little section of the bridge where DOT has its, this is where we have all the stuff in order to fill the potholes, which is going on usually from about 10 o'clock at night until 1 or 2 in the morning. What about that? It's right next door to it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Want to go?
Hi, my name is Magda Napoleon and I'm a lifetime Lower East Sider. One of my concerns is that you say you had community input and I see that you had like a 60% approval for all of this. I want to know what that number actually looks like. Was it 60% of 200, 60% of 3,000? What does that number actually look like? Because this affects a great deal of people. And I'm always a little taken aback with these surveys and how they're given to the community, right? So I'd like to know what that number actually looks like. Also, I have concerns about the 6th Street Bridge, right? And the traffic being changed there and that bridge going practically to Avenue D. I think with Valentina's question, this survey didn't take into account congestion pricing and how changing streets and how this now traffic is going to move in to Avenue D and into our communities, you know, so those are things that I'm concerned about, you know, that going forth, we do need to take congestion pricing into account and how that's going to affect our community. And we don't know that yet until it's actually running. So I think that sadly, this was too soon. I think this needs to be revisited later on. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. And we're gonna spot.
You know, that congestion pricing is a really big factor and it hasn't happened yet. And you're right, the timing matters there. Just on the survey, your question on that, which it is really important because we're trying to understand everybody's perspectives. So it did say on there, because we're the same way, we want to know, is it 50% of whatever? So that one, the last survey on the options, I think we had like 82 responses. So it was like 62 of 82. And so that's not a huge amount. Our earlier survey about what folks wanted us to study, we had over 700 responses. That was a lot better. But I think one of the things, and we're happy to talk about this more, is, you know, when we have the conversations and we kind of hear feedback and it sounds like, oh, like everybody kind of feels this way, like we do go through and read all of the survey responses because we're like, well, what are people really saying? And this process, I mean, it has been interesting because, you know, there are 6 communities that are immediately affected by this project that live next to the FDR. And then at the same time, the East River Park, it serves the whole city in a lot of ways. You know, people come from all over. So when we kind of dug into people's responses, you do hear a diversity of perspectives on what people want, which is important to kind of take into account. But also, you know, just going forward, you know, again, if East 6th Street Bridge advances as a project, I mean, engaging with Reese and Wald around that is going to be really important to really understand the impacts of the people who live right there. So I think we definitely hear your point of view on that and share it.
There's one more in the room so far.
Hi, everyone. Shahida Smith from Good Old Lower East Side. Thank you all for coming out again and doing another stint of community engagement. I actually worked with them to go to Velati Seniors program with Henry Street, as well as Henry Street BGR next to Lindley and Walton Jacob Reese houses. I just want to inform you all, I don't know if you know, this is going up my nose and I don't like how that looks. I look crazy. If you know that Jacob Reese houses is going to probably be going through Rad Pack, right? I don't know if you're aware of that. So that can also be a contingency around this plan, especially 6th Street, because, you know, with Rad Pack is going to be a lot of construction and a lot of community engagement. So that's something that I think that is important for you all to consider. And also, I've heard a lot about, the comparisons from the east side and the west side. In my opinion, geographically is very different. So, we have a lot more overpasses. The FDR Drive is very different than the West Side Highway. So to make that comparison, to me, in my mind, being a New Yorker my whole life, it's like you think about the West Side and the traffic patterns, and the East Side and the traffic patterns. To say it's not as ambitious, and I'm not here to like say go waterfront recovery, whatever access study. I'm just saying, like, geographically they're different. And that's something that we need to consider, because when we have overpasses and you have flooding in the FDR Drive, you know, that's a whole lot of layers that we're considering. And everybody in terms of the city agencies needs to be at the table when they're having these discussions, because I fail to hear NYCHA representation in a lot of these conversations, and we know that they're going through some stuff. So it's just important that we consider that all of these partners need to be at the table when we make some of these considerations, because budget-wise, it's going to take a whole lot more than just saying, hey, this study that doesn't even have funding is going to like change everything, you know? So that's just my opinion. They've heard everything else from me, so I don't need to say more.
Thank you. Did you want to speak, girl? Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Allie Ryan. I actually attended 2 of the 3 workshops. The first workshop I attended, I was in a breakout room, but there were only 3 of us. And the second one, I believe there was like 5 of us. And both times I requested that you talk to the Jacob Rees Houses community, the Lillian Wald community, and Baruch Houses community. I live close to the 10th Street Bridge as well as the 6th Street Bridge. So those are where I normally go over. So I specifically chose to be in those breakout rooms. And I'm going to talk about the 6th Street Bridge because every single person was against what you proposed. So I don't know who was agreeing with you, because that was not my experience being in person. And as I said, at that time, you cannot, in the middle of 6th Street between Avenue D and the FDR Drive is where Jacob Rees puts all of their trash to be picked up. So you are designing a bridge where trash is going to be picked up, and you're narrowing the street as well. And I asked in the meeting that you go visit in person the area so you could see for yourself. And there are a lot of senior citizens who live in that area. So taking away, and it wasn't really clear in your presentation today, but you're also planning to take away the parking on the FDR Drive going up to 10th Street and even around the roundabout in 10th Street. And that was not clear today, but I just want everybody to know. And the people who live in these NYCHA developments, they have cars because they work. They work in Queens. And so I think it's real, and we only have 1 bus along Avenue D, and it's the 14D. And several years ago, we lost a lot of the bus stops. So I just think you need to be get more involved with the people the residents who live here, because this is going to directly impact them. Thank you.
All right, I will go, unless you have something you want to add, I'm going to go to online. Susan, if you just let them one at a time, or in groups, you must call them one at a time. Looks like Tommy Love, you'll be first.
I'm going to promote a bunch of people, but Tommy will be the first to speak.
Yeah, we'll be sometime after this. We'll come back to committee. And then
We still have another agenda item too.
Then we got to go to the next agenda item.
Okay, Tommy, I can't see you anywhere. Your camera's on now. I still can't see you though.
Hello?
Yeah, okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you.
I live in East River Housing, directly across from the new Delancey Street Bridge. In fact, I'm looking at the construction right now. For the life of me, the area that you're talking about improving is between like Mangan Street and the FDR Drive Service Road. Right now, the East River Housing has a parking lot on one side of that street that has over 200 cars in it that egress and access that area on a constant basis. Secondarily, as someone just mentioned, DOT has all the space under the Williamsburg Bridge. And they, not only at night, but during the day, they use that to soften tar and emit enormous amounts of toxic fumes. In fact, we've complained to our avail about that happening in a residential area. So that space and the money you're spending sounds ludicrous, because we've been asking, for example, for some time, that there be additional greening in East River Park. A large portion of that park is being filled with artificial turf, cement, and non-living things. The money you've spent already, or the money you're proposing, would be better spent on greening in the park, not next to the park. Secondarily, for example, with Basketball City, it's a nightmare for anybody who walks, drives in the community near there. For example, right now, the parking lot that is used for Basketball City is in fact being used as a parking lot for the workers for ESCR. So it's not even available for the next 2 or 3 years for Basketball City for their major events. That's why, as Valentina said, on days of major events, for the blocks and blocks around Basketball City, there are SUVs and cars and Ubers parked all over the sidewalks, parked all over the streets, double parked, creating enormous congestion in that area. And finally, I just want to end by asking, you said this study was $600,000. Is that the complete cost of the study, or just the Arcadis portion of this study?
Yes, the entire study. Okay, now we're gonna call on Chris Ryan.
He's outside.
I can't hear a response.
Oh, they said it was entire.
You can't be heard, Susan.
You're not heard.
I'd like an answer on the Arcadis question, on the amount of money being spent on this.
We were unmuted.
Can you hear us now?
We can't hear you.
Yes, we can.
And it's very strange. Yeah.
Can you?
We can't hear you, David.
Okay. Can you hear on?
Still can't hear you.
You can't, yeah, I don't know what's wrong.
I can hear you, Tommy.
I know you can hear me. We can't
No,
hear
I can
you.
hear, I heard them a little bit.
That you?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can't hear that. I can hear you, Susan.
And I plead like an answer to the question I asked.
Okay, so I'm trying to answer, it is the cost of the entire study. So if we can go to Chris Ryan now, please, and I think we need to plug in again.
Okay.
Chris, can you unmute and speak?
Doesn't look like he is in the meeting. He is outside the meeting.
No, oh, okay, let me.
Now you can be heard.
Okay. Chris Ryan, I am promoting you to panelist.
Wait, can I get an answer to that question, Susan?
We answered, it is the entire cost.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
We actually did it a few people who we lost their hands.
no,
Okay,
no, we didn't. They're all panelists now. Chris Ryan, can you speak now? We have to unmute.
You're muted, Chris.
No, he has to unmute. Okay, Chris, unmute
Sorry about
yourself.
that. Sorry about that.
Good. We
I would
can
just
hear
like
you
to
now.
ask,
Speak
I'd
up.
just like to ask I would like to ask the board just to hear what I'm hearing, which is that the deck plan over the FDR doesn't sound like the residents have the same conclusion as you, that it would be, should be dead in the water. I think, it sounds like people are still interested in the holistic approach and decking over the FDR, and that I would like to consider, it sounds a little patronizing that NYCHA can't handle the disruption when they would be gaining basically an entire green space, a backyard, if the way I understand is they were going to make a deck that would be green. So there's a lot of disruption right now. I mean, East River Park, of course, is very disrupted. So their lives are already disrupted and they're used to that with very little reward to look forward to. But if they knew we're losing this traffic under our kids' windows and maybe the emissions are going to get ventilated out over the water and open air, not in front of their windows, that it would be something that they would actually consider. And to echo the woman who said, you know, the 60 some people, that isn't much of a real successful reach out to get feedback. So I think you have to,
Could just repeat, you're speaking very low, so I want to repeat
I'm
it.
sorry.
I
I'm sorry.
want to repeat it for the people in the room.
Yeah.
Chris is wants the decking of the FDR to be considered, and he talked about the encroachment on NYCHA, and, you know, said perhaps that should be a conversation with people living there about what they would gain or lose. I'm gonna look, thank you, Chris. I'm gonna look and see if there's, I don't see any more hands.
Lost the hand. There were 3 people, for instance, Wendy's one of them. By the way, would people please mute themselves if you're not intending to speak? A couple times I've gotten bust through from, for instance,
Okay.
Wendy and Catherine.
Okay, Wendy, can you speak now?
Yes, thank you. It was good to see all this. I came to all 3 of the events, which seem to have fewer and fewer people attending each one. And I agree, better outreach is needed for any future planning along here. I want to say something about the bike lanes in the park, the future park. There's going to be an 11-foot wide bike lane. That's a 2-way bike lane that's going to be crisscrossed by pedestrians. It's also going to be along a path where vehicles will travel. There are 3 parking lots in the new park, and the Parks Department told me they're going to be parking vehicles there from throughout the area. So the bike lanes inside the park will have traffic on them, as well as runners, bicyclers, including the new bicyclists who used to always come to the park to practice. So don't think we're going to get an extra wide, 22-foot wide greenway like we used to have. And even then that got crowded at times. So I really feel like we do need bike lanes on the west side of the drive. And I don't know if people in this who did the study know, but Baruch houses have new parking areas along that west side of the drive that were just built in the last year. So that could take up some of the parking slack potentially. And lastly, I want to say that several people have mentioned the FDR, and I don't know if any of you saw the studies sketch for how the FDR could be decked, but the early sketches were, to me, it was designed to be rejected. It was way too massive, and it could have been done in a very elegant way. All of us have seen images of other drives that have been decked. And it's just really disappointing that this got pushed to the side when that was, I think, for many people in the community, a really important. Yes, there was. Yes, thank you. So those are my points, and thank you. I hope if this continues, we can have a better focus on that element.
Thank you. Ellen, you're up next. Can you speak?
Hi, I'm the East River Housing Corporation's Vice President of the Board of Directors, and I'm a little bit puzzled by the knowledge of the history of the Esker eternity for the Delancey Street Bridge. we agreed to change the entrance to our parking lot to accommodate two things for the Delancey Street Bridge. One was for the handicap incline that was necessary, and for the widening of it so that there would be more access for bicyclists, pedestrians, handicapped people, etc. When we agreed to that, part of that agreement entailed, initially the plan was to put the overpass directly in front of our building 4, which is the first building closest to the Delancey Street Bridge, the 475 FDR Drive. We protested that, and we worked with the designers to get an acute angle off of Delancey Street to cross over to the central area of the new park where they wanted the pedestrian bridge to go. By putting bicycle lanes, we had already discussed with them, we needed access to the front of our building for ambulances, police, fire department, etc., that must go through our main entrance, although we have 3 towers in each of our buildings. Putting a bike path there will impede access to those things, as well as dropping off people at the front entrance out of the way when they take an Uber or their personal vehicles. In addition, closing off Mansion Street prevents access to go to Delancey Street to access other roadways. We also have our issues with our garbage that needs to go around. So all of that history seems to be dismissed in this planning. And I too question the number of people who responded. We have 1,650 families in our development alone. So I don't know where your numbers came from or why you would think that was so. And I also question.
Okay, Ellen, I'm sorry, I had to mute you because maybe you couldn't hear us. We're trying to ask you to wrap it up. If we could go to the next person, Garrett, you're the last speaker.
Oh, I'm the last. Hi, I wanted to speak a little bit about pedestrian safety on the footbridges. People are increasingly worried about the size, speed, and weight of e-bikes that are sharing pedestrian pathways. I attended the workshops for this project, and I don't see any comments made to address pedestrians' worry when it comes to walking over the footbridges with bikes, skateboards, motorcycles, mopeds also sharing those footbridges with pedestrians. The current footbridges currently utilize 4 or 6 wraparounds where bicyclists have to stop and turn 90 degrees or 180 degrees and hopefully dismount. That makes it safer for the pedestrians to cross those footbridges. What's being presented to us at 6th Street and at Jackson Street, and I also believe at 10th Street, is a 2.5-story elongated bike ramp. There's nothing to tell a bicyclist to stop or dismount. I don't want to be on those footbridges. When I look ahead and I'm walking with my dachshund or my small dog, or if I'm walking with children, I don't want to be on that footbridge when I see 4 electric city bikes enter that ramp on high speeds and then continue to accelerate down past me. We've got to address pedestrian safety and access when it comes to access to that park. And I think the only way to do it is these footbridges need to be made wider, and there needs to be a dedicated path for pedestrians only and a protected bike path for bicyclists.
Okay, thank you. I see that there is one more person. Sorry, Jasmine, I didn't see you before, but you're now promoted. So if you can unmute.
This is the last.
Thank you, Susan. I did have a question and a comment. I don't want to belabor the issue, but I do want to say that 82 people is not a deciding factor to massive decisions being made in this community. Just to give a visualization, 82 people is only half of one building in Baruch houses. So that's how you can see what that number looks like, right? Chris had mentioned that we should be used to this already because of the current construction, and not in a negative way. But the fact is that no one should be living in a war zone. We have had construction within Baruch houses, and we're also at the same time simultaneously seeing the East River Park under demolition, right? This is something that affects our health, affects our mental state, and affects our ability to live a quality of life. And I guess my question would be, is there a way to invest in true community surveying by being more intentional and not just doing the bare minimum of posting in buildings and expecting a TA or whoever to do some outreach? Because in 2019, when we were discussing the East Side Coastal Resiliency Plan, one of the major concerns was the lack of outreach to NYCHA by CB3 and poor communities in this neighborhood, and that those conversations should be centered closer to where the acts are supposed to be happening, right? So I'm just wondering if there's a chance to do more surveying and get more of a data on that, as opposed to just moving forward with something.
Hey, Jasmine, thanks for that. You know, that's a really good idea. Well, one thing that you mentioned that I just wanted to acknowledge was the construction. I think it's something that like we in this study had to be really sensitive of, that the community is in the middle of like a massive construction project with East River Park, and that, you know, some of the solutions that we were looking at would mean additional construction if they were to move forward. And you know, that was something that, you know, we really wanted to talk about and understand with the community, you know, what the tolerance would be for additional construction on top of what's happening. I wanted to acknowledge that. But I think, yeah, you know, it's a good idea that you know, the surveys, we did 3 surveys. The first survey, in each of the surveys, we had a lot of help from organizations in the neighborhood, and I believe also the community board, and sharing the link to the survey. The first survey we got an incredible 700 people that responded to it, and you know, maybe it was because it was the end of the summer or the timing, but the response did trail off in the later surveys. The survey seeking feedback on these improvement concepts, it's still open, and I think we could share that link, you know, again through the network of folks that have been helping out with this, to, you know, gather more response and hear more perspectives, and incorporate that into the final report.
Thank you, Chris. As a lifelong resident of public housing, I'd be happy to share my info and be part of that group to get this circulating within NYCHA.
Definitely appreciate that.
Do you want me to connect you? Do you want me to have people, how do you want to do that?
I think you would connect to Kate.
Yeah. Okay, do you want them to email to me and I should forward it to you? Okay, if you guys will email me at the community board, I will forward everything to Kate at DOT, and then she will connect with you on future surveys. You have my email, right? Stetzer, cbny.nyc.gov.
I have it. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, so I
Thanks,
think.
Chris.
So there are 2 board members.
The way that's been done, nobody's been taking a survey. It's in all developments I've seen it. It has to be different types of engagement. So folks want to engage the community, they have to be outside.
Hi, we can hear.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut this off right now. We only have 40 more minutes. We have to be out of here. We have another agenda item. So Jane.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that about the community engagement aspect. So I saw on the diagram that you had Gouverneur Gardens and Elias Ecology Center, and I understand partnering with environmental based organizations to get the word out about what's happening. But what other tactics have you used? Like, you know, she just said that they're in the management office and they're in the buildings, but have you been to like TA meetings? Have you during the summer been to family days? And I know this isn't like the census where you're knocking on everyone's door, but even at my organization, I work at a community center, and it's very hard to get people through emails, especially when you have a lot of seniors living in these NYCHA buildings. So what other ways have you been getting the word out? Because I do remember seeing the workshop on a couple of elected officials' newsletters, but that was also a few days before the workshops were happening, which, you know, like, if people aren't getting advance notice, then of course no one's gonna show up, and as I've heard, less and less people were showing up to these things.
Add to it that Goals did work with DOT. They did use a community organization with focus groups and help get the word out, which is usually, you know, a way to be as successful as possible. But it sounds like they're willing to do some more outreach.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's other, like, there's Nazareth Housing, there's University Solomon Building, Center for Recovery and Wellness, so I'm just, that was my point, to just say that there are other organizations that aren't environmental based that work with seniors that could have helped with, you know, with spreading the
Let's hear what
word,
they have to say.
just getting them understanding.
Yeah.
You were about to reply, I thought.
Oh, no, I was just taking in, what organization do you work at?
Maybe.
Oh, we could follow up now.
Yeah,
Okay.
follow up, if you could send those in.
Great.
Because, and I do want to say that they do, you know, ask to be connected to many of the organizations. We always try and give them local organizations.
Lee had a comment and then.
Yeah, so thank you very much for doing this, but I do have to say, and thank you for the comments. The way that this was originally advertised, I think is misleading. Because it was advertised as East Side Waterfront Access Study. And our residents, especially those most impacted, those who live alongside the FDR Drive and the East River and the park, how are they supposed to know that waterfront access meant closing down the service road, removing parking, prohibiting turns? There was no possible way for them to know that. And so when you say you've got 84 people attending, or maybe 170 people, again, according to my estimate alone, not including all the housing developments, you've got close to 20,000 people. So your number is not even 1.5%. So had all the residents been aware that waterfront access also included creating a bike lane, shutting down access to multiple buildings, restricting parking, you would have had more input, and input by people affected, as opposed to people who just, well, it's a car, let's get rid of it. Thank you.
Okay, so we have got to move on to the next agenda item. And I'm gonna put you on Michelle. I'm gonna let you hold this as if it was a mic and camera. We can design.
Why don't you sit over here?
Okay.
Sure.
Sure.
That's okay, if you have it.
There's Wi-Fi here, right?
So there's Wi-Fi. I don't know how to get onto it. So I'll just while they troubleshoot that, what this next agenda item is, it's not that new anymore. It's been around for a year, but there's a new category of street event, which is commercial time. 1 moment, please. Can I what? And do you not have Wi-Fi access to here? I don't have my thing with me. Yeah, it's in the house. I just don't know how to.
You know what?
It's it.
Yeah.
It might be easier if
Yeah.
just flip the resolution on this. Sure, if we're sharing the screen.
It's it. Do we have that?
I have the, I
Alright,
have.
I'm just
the-
gonna talk through this.
I have
We've had 2 applications come to us. We'll discuss a little bit about what more about what these are, but these are not your nonprofit or community organization based street events. Okay, can we please let me talk the meeting? Thank you. We've had 2 applications come to us and neither one really came to fruition. There's a lot of confusion about what these are. And we are considering tonight, we're going to consider guidance to organizations, commercial businesses who are interested in doing some sort of street event. These all involve a fee. And there's things that people didn't know about when they came to us, and we're going to try, I hope to clear that up. I'm going to let Michelle guide this, but we kind of want to have it up on the screen before we talk too much about it.
It's possible we won't be able to do that because this is connected to DOT. Central Grid, and is gonna sit in there.
I don't see one of those on this one. Well, we may not be able to share the thing, but it's just going to be a lot of words, which we can, we'll speak to the important part of it. Michelle, do you want to take it from here, whether we can share it or not? I think we may have to assume that we're not going to be sharing it. Of course, we'll take public comment on it as well if people become interested. We only have, really, we have a half hour. We have a half hour to complete this.
If everyone on the committee, that it won't show on there. Yeah, if everyone on the committee has it on their phones, I think that's enough, right? Is that okay?
Yeah, that would be fine. We'll read it.
Okay.
Do you want me to bring it up on there?
It doesn't really matter because if we can't plug this into
Well, if you could bring up here, we could then at least share
Yeah,
it.
you
to
could
the
share
board.
No, we can't share this.
Have
to
an
that.
HDMI output on your, okay.
No, you can
Share this
if you-
between
you
them.
can share it
Oh,
to
you
Zoom.
don't,
Yeah.
you don't
Not
need
to
this.
here,
You don't need that.
Yeah.
If you could share
Oh,
it
the
to
people,
board,
people on that.
avoid having to read. it.
There it is. Would anybody in the audience like to have access to what we are reading or what we read?
Yeah, I didn't, I would have printed it out. I didn't know that we weren't. My emails,
Yeah, they'll be able to hear you if you talk.
I guess it's time to go, right?
Choose about anything.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to get my email isn't even on here.
Okay, should we
It's
just,
a short resolution.
should we demote anyone that's a panelist?
Want me to put
It's okay,
everyone-
I can do it. I can do it. Okay, I'll just start. Just everyone please keep off on mute if you're a panelist. So as David was saying, we've gotten 2 applications for commercial street events, which are a relatively new type of street closure. Typically, we've only gotten those from nonprofits. And we decided as a committee last month to develop guidance that Susan could point these applicants to for commercial street events so that they understand what, well, if the board passes it, what we as a board are looking for in these type of applications. And so the committee, I distributed a draft of this that a small working group from the committee had developed over the month, and Susan had given input on. And so I will read that out loud now because unless, do you think does anyone want to discuss this before I read the draft?
Why don't you read the draft?
Okay.
Because, yeah, that's really. what we discussed.
Okay, and I'll just say that I'm gonna make one edit based on Susan's feedback, but I'll tell you what that is. So the title is Community Board 3 Guidance to Commercial Street Event Applicants. And as I said, this would be on this Community Board 3 website that we can point applicants to. Whereas businesses apply for permits from the Street Activity Permit Office, SAPO, for street events to close sidewalks or partial street closings for grand openings, production events, promotions, or special events for the businesses, as well as parties that are similar to block parties or single block festivals, traditionally hosted by nonprofits and I put in there the cost, but Susan suggested that we not include it because it could change.
True.
So I thought I think that's a very good point. So let's say that we're not going to put the cost in, but we will include a link to the page where SAPO talks about these types of permits so that you can see all the different ones. There's small ones to extra large ones, and they have different costs. The second whereas would be whereas Community Board 3 offers the following guidance for commercial street events applicants. This guidance will inform applicants regarding policies that inform CB3's votes, as well as create consistency in policies informing the board's recommendations. The guidance will additionally allow meetings to be shorter and more efficient, which is a benefit to applicants, board members, and the public. The guidance will allow immediate responses to applicants regarding potential lack of support. and will also allow applicants to immediately submit an application that will meet guidelines and be supported instead of waiting for denial by the committee. Now I'm going to go into the bullets of the guidance. The board will seek to minimize any negative impact to residents created by commercial street events, such as excessive closures or amplified sounds. The board encourages commercial applicants for street events to partner with local organizations or community members to apply for a block party instead of a commercial street event, an event type the board has traditionally found to not have a public benefit. The main activity of any event should not be an amplified noise generating activity. Any amplified noise generating activity should be limited to no more than 4 hours of the event. The board will generally not approve events that interfere with MTA bus routes. That's the proposed guidance.
Okay. Discussion by committee. Let's clarify. Let's separate this. Let's not debate yet until we have actually allowed the public to weigh in if they prefer, but if there are clarifying questions or comments to help clarify. Okay. Public, is there someone in the room or online who wants to speak about this to us? I'll give you 2 minutes. Not seeing any right off the bat. I will look back from time to time to see if someone has changed their mind. Oh, someone just do it?
No, it's just moving.
Okay. Okay. So one comment, the lead into the bullets, the last sentence sounds, well, could you just read it again about it waiting to be approved? Because
Yeah.
they're waiting to see whether they'll be approved.
Yeah.
Because it's okay.
The guidance will allow immediate responses to applicants regarding potential lack of support. That would be Susan pointing them to the link to this guidance.
Yep.
And will also allow applicants to immediately submit an application that will meet guidelines and be supported instead of waiting for denial by the committee.
Yeah, well, they might still get denied. So can we just phrase it differently? It
Potentially.
maximizes their chances. What? This is not for,
This is, we would be telling them in advance that this is not gonna, this is likely not to be approved, and then they could adjust that. This happens a lot with bus routes. So we get applications and it would be on a bus, closing a bus street. I email them and I say, this is the committee's guidance, they're likely to deny it. Why don't you find another place? They find another place and then come to the committee. So they don't come to the committee, get denied, and then have to come back and get it.
I understand,
Do you wanna
but the
say-
phrasing sounds like it says you will be approved if you follow these guidelines. And I just want to make sure it doesn't say that.
So you mean and be potentially supported instead of waiting for denial?
Potentially
Be supported or?
and likely to be. I would even say, more likely to be supported.
More
But
likely.
certainly, if any of these things were violated that you just read, like way off the mark, yeah, well, we would say, no, we're telling them that. But I would just say, so we do want to, I mean, it is to make it more efficient for both sides.
So after the and, you want to make a motion and
Yeah,
more
so
likely.
that application that will meet guidelines and be more likely to be supported instead of waiting for denial by the committee. Well, that instead is like to know at least about the red flags up front. So I don't know how to, maybe it's 2 sentences.
So there's only guidelines, comma, and will be.
Okay, well, the first thought was to immediately submit an application. The guidance will allow immediate responses to applications regarding potential lack of support. Instead of waiting to hear at committee. That could be one sentence. And then the next one, it would allow them to immediately submit an application that will.
Oh, I
that's
see.
sort of
So,
less
okay.
repetitive. Regarding
Wait,
potential lack
you
of.
should look over Nancy shoulder. not
Okay,
mine. She's
because
talking.
it's-
She's very small.
Instead of waiting to hear that from the committee. Not that, I would say to hear that from the committee. Immediate responses, regarding potential lack of support, right? Yeah, this will allow applicants to immediately submit an application that will meet guidelines and be more likely to be supported. Colon. Okay, so let me read the 2 sentences that have been drafted here to replace that one and I would tell that, yeah. Okay, it's say the guidance will allow immediate responses to applicants regarding potential lack of support instead of waiting to hear that from the committee. This will also allow applicants to immediately submit an application that will meet guidelines and be more likely to be supported. Okay, maybe one sentence is a little better, but the only reason I brought it up is because when I first heard it, I was like, wait to be approved at committee. And I was like, whether, but this will, yeah, you.
What is the title of it? Because my concern and the reason I wanted the title to be guidance for commercial events, because we also have other guidance and, I wanted to be clear.
It says, Community Board 3 guidance to commercial street events.
Okay, because I just wanted to be clear that you're gonna have different, on the page of the different.
Right.
documents.
We do have a document there, although I think it's just a very brief resolution that we have for the other.
But it does talk about the four
adjacent
hours.
to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does talk about bus routes, so.
All right, so we talked about excessive closures, amplified sound, encourage them to partner with someone local or nonprofit, should not be noise again, more noise again, and don't want to interfere with buses. So it's buses, noise in various forms, and encouraging them to partner with a local organization or nonprofit. Any other things that ought to be in the guidance? Did that help anyone in the public feel like they want to weigh in? Well, yeah, we do actually, we talked about those things at events. We talked about at committee, like how long before will the street closure be and how long afterwards for cleaning up. We do want to make sure that they have a decent plan. Should we have it in here that we really want to make sure that they have a plan for setup and shutdown?
That's all required by the city before they come to us. The city, has their requirements about you can start at this time, you must be done by this time, you must leave an emergency lane, you must do all these things. And by the time we get the application, all that's been approved or they can't do it.
I didn't have the sense that either of the two applications we had that plan.
So the woman, they are very rare. Because you don't see most of the applications, most of them are recurring.
Right.
So that woman who wouldn't let me help her, she just had issues. And the guy that came to us, he did actually know, but he was arguing with Sappho and he said, no, you must let me do it free. And that was his issue.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, I didn't have the sense that either one had a good organizational skill to throw an event, to shut down the street, have an event, like one was a rock concert.
Then they can't do it.
Okay.
Sappho won't
Let them
do
come
it.
to our level.
So I think the women actually emailed us. They were not approved. Their plan was not approved by the city.
So is the procedure with, because this is part of the problem, is that the Sappho office didn't define much up front. So has it changed to the point now?
Sappho, yeah, I think it's actually very clear, but on top of that, nothing will ever go through without all those plans set in stone.
You mean they won't happen in the world?
They
I want to
won't
protect the committee from having the 45-minute problems we had twice in last year.
That was twice, and those were those two applicants
Okay.
out of hundreds of applicants.
Yeah.
Those were two people.
Still, there's nothing in here that says we're going to expect you to explain your plans in a way that we're going to be able to understand and and realize that you're going to be able to have a successful.
Well, I think that's assumed, right? In the guidelines.
So what I can do,
It is.
which, it hasn't been requested before because it's changed from one committee to another, is we can put that on the website. We can copy it and put it on the website.
Copy it from where?
From
The staff voting?
In the Safe Healthcare portal.
Okay, well, does anyone in the committee want to weigh in on whether we should have one bullet point about this?
Just a question, so does it go to Sappho?
It goes to Sappho first. So what happens, it goes to Sappho. They won't even let us approve or not approve until it's gone through a certain amount of approval periods.
So do we want to just include a bullet that just says that applicants have already gone through the Sappho?
So who are you telling that to?
Applicants.
They already know that because they've already been dealing with Sappho.
Well,
They can't come to us I'm gonna say, except for those two very rare exceptions, they really can't come. If you want to, there's no downside. It's just, it doesn't add it.
Two rare.
Yeah, I don't think it adds.
We've had 100% of applications have come to us. I don't know how rare it is. I mean, it's true, we're only getting 2 a year at this rate. But 45 minutes at a committee meeting where we know we have to say no and we're trying to like figure out a way to say it.
Put it
to
in.
someone who's
I'm
getting
saying it's
angrier and
very
angrier.
rare,
Well,
because-
let's just take here that this, well, let's say that the process starts with Sapo. Somewhere here, so that we don't, because it may be the whereas.
That's not, that's
Yeah.
not guidance. that's
Okay,
just like
sure.
whereas these-
Right, but
It
the,
isn't guidance, we're not telling them to do anything.
Yeah.
well, look, for some reason, we stuck one on the board for the Dime X fair that had not gone to Sapo yet because they were coming asking, what the hell do we do to make this happen? They hadn't gone to Sapo.
So that was maybe my fault. I was trying to be helpful to them,
Okay.
and I will never do that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, maybe it
I
doesn't. make it
promise
here.
not to burden you with that in the future. It was not productive.
Unless someone else wants to put something in, I'm gonna stop pursuing.
Because we're not able to be helpful.
That's the process. I don't think it's literally
Yeah.
the process.
Okay, so then, it sounds like we can vote. Ready to vote? All in favor of this? So that's, unanimous, 7 present, and there's zeros for others. For other types of votes. So there's no other business that we are gonna be addressing tonight, no linger discussion. Let's do a roll call vote, roll call.
David
attendance.
Crane,
Here,
Solomon Fletcher,
Here.
Vincent Cerrito,
Here.
Sean Garcia, Nancy Conkier, Michelle Coopersmith, Lee Berman,
Here.
Jaylene Rosario. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. No, there's not in here anymore.
Oh,
I mean,
Yeah.
unless it was rescinded or something.
I think
Sure.
he
You resigned.
Oh, I thought he was on the, I thought